Hello, everybody. It is time, finally, for the 2021 Hoglaw YouTube channel debate program Game of the Year. We used to do this as capsules of each video game, but frankly, the law calls at the end of each year, so we moved it to a debate. If Tom could slow down and take off the sound of that YouTube channel he just opened, could you mute that, buddy? What in the world? Okay, I think that was me, actually. That's great. Anyway, thank you all for joining us. Please let us know if the mics are working. We're doing this a little bit differently this year, if the stream is coming through. If everything is happening as we have wanted it to happen, please confirm that for us. And with that said, I'd like to introduce the one, the only, Tom Hogue, who I know you've all been waiting to hear from more than you've been waiting to hear from me. Hey, Tom, how are you doing, buddy?
Good. I just got the YouTube chat up, so I can keep track of it because I'm speaking now. Can you guys hear me?
I can certainly hear you. I'm ready to talk. I just don't know whether everything is working because nobody has said that they can hear the microphone. Dell says he can't hear Tom.
Yeah. Dell said he couldn't hear me. Audio is good. Cool. Yeah, hi,
Dell's in now, so that's good. That's good. Well, Tom, first of all, everybody is thrilled to hear from you. Everybody is thrilled to see that you're alive. If you recall, last December, we told folks that in 2021, you'd be appearing more often because you like doing this. And I believe that was the last time you appeared.
Did we say that?
We did. We said more Thabtos. Everybody likes them. And instead of Thabtos, what I got was every 3 or 4 videos, people saying, where the heck is Tom? Where is Tom? Yes, Rick, I know what you had to say. Where's Tom? So, Tom, can you, one, I know you have a few disclaimers to give, but 2, in, brief form, say, hey, had a busy year, and I've told people that you've left Activision. Nobody knows where you've gone. I didn't know what could be said about that. So just hit us with your brief details for 2021 as you find yourself talking about video games once again.
Yeah, so 2021 was a whirlwind, which is why I haven't really had a lot of times to do Thabtos. I had some personal time I had to take off in the middle to late part of the year, so I didn't actually play a lot of games from like August to November, or at least you'll see some in there.
You're doing some catching up, folks. It's no worry.
But my list may be a little peculiar for that. Yep, I changed jobs. So this will be the disclaimer part. So first of all, I was an employee of High Moon Studios, which is owned by Activision. So any commentary, for both of these, any opinions I express are solely my own. They do not represent Activision or High Moon in any way.
Lawyers.
And then I actually moved to ZeniMax Online Studios just a couple weeks ago, really. And they are owned by Microsoft. So the opinions I express are solely my own. I do not represent Microsoft or ZeniMax Online Studios in any way. Also, what I'm working on at ZeniMax is super private, confidential, and I can't talk about it at all.
I know nothing, for the record.
I won't.
So let me get this straight, Tom. You said Activision, too big of a shop. I'm going to go to Microsoft. Is that how it went down?
Not exactly. I think I'd done enough Call of Duty for my career.
Sure. Very popular game. But so you're moving on. Tom is hopefully in greener pastures, excited about everything. He is at ZeniMax Online, which I think is most prominently known for, Tom can correct me on this, as Elder Scrolls Online right now. Is that accurate?
I think that's, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We don't want him to get even remotely close to any kind of borderlines of what he might say. But so he's had one of those years, folks, where you change up a whole bunch of stuff and you go through some things. But he's happy to be here now, I think. I'm speaking for him at this point, but I'd like to think he's happy to be here and that I didn't browbeat him. And I definitely didn't tweet out the announcement for this the second he agreed to it to make sure he couldn't back up. So that wasn't me. I didn't do that. Right, Tom?
As soon as I was like, yeah, I think I could do that.
Yep.
Here's the tweet.
Yep, you're in. Anyway, okay. So you said you didn't play a ton of games. The good news is AAA gaming kind of slowish this year, right? Pandemic moved a bunch of stuff we know to early 2022. Even said, I thought 2021 was kind of cool. You got to dive into a bunch of different things, a lot of weird little things, and even the AAA space was doing what they could. They were, I think we talked about this earlier. They're rebooting, they're remastering, they're getting frame rates up across the generations because that's the easiest thing for them to do. And so I found myself with a lot to play, a lot of stuff that I enjoyed, even if I mean, I think realistically, Sony basically goes dark the second half of the year. Like they just go away, and don't really release much of anything. Did you find that you had a good year gaming when you did get a chance to game, or is this a down year to you?
No, I mean, I think it was decent. Like when I was going through and putting together my list, one, I noticed that I played most of the major releases and a bunch of sort of smaller ones. And also, yeah, it was a weird kind of like a lot of next gen updates and upgrades, and some of them like really breathed a lot of new life into the games. Like I hadn't played Final Fantasy VII that much, and I got into that with the Intergrade upgrade.
Sure, I thought the 1997 version was, great.
Yeah, no. So they really brought it up to speed for me. There's just basically, I mean, there's a lot of stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna like list it.
No,
all,
I jokingly said, I think I tweeted out, I jokingly said there could just be a division of, I'm going to play Death Stranding Director's Cut and Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut. Maybe I'll play some Alan Wake Remastered. Hit me with some of that Final Fantasy VII Intergrade. You could have an entire category of like stuff I already liked that runs a bit better and looks a little prettier.
Right.
So no, I think that's great. I want to talk to people a little bit about what we're going to do format-wise. It's going to be similar but not identical to what we did last year. We're going to have a discussion of honorable mentions, things that aren't on our list. I also have a list that I made that's effectively things that won't appear on my top 10 so that, either that's because I didn't play them enough or so that we can have a good, honest meeting of the minds where you yell at me in chat about the fact that I don't much love Halo Infinite. So we'll get there. So get your barbs and jibes ready. We'll have that as a page ready to go. The other thing we did this year that's a little bit different is that Tom has assembled kind of similar lists and certainly his top 10, but we don't have that prepared in the same way that I have mine prepared. I'll have slides and, great stuff because I'm in charge. And of course my list is better, but Tom wants to keep his a mystery. I think that's going to work pretty well, but effectively what we'll be doing is we'll be going through Tom's list and we'll be creating it on the fly. So when Tom gives us something real weird and inscrutable, we're going to be adding it to his list. And then we'll be talking about what random game he added so that we can understand what he's thinking. But before then, we're going to be talking about everything else that we've talked about in prior broadcasts. And we'll be starting with my honorable mentions, unless Tom had anything else to add here.
No, we can do that. That's cool.
All right. Is everybody ready? Let's talk about some great games that didn't make my list. And then we'll go from there with the rest and have a great time. And then Tom will tell me how many things I got wrong because that's what he does. So let's talk about my honorable mentions. So number one on this list, and these are things you won't see on my top 10, but I thought I enjoyed, I had fun with. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. I know that was one of the Game Awards top 5 games of the year. I enjoyed it. I fully expect this game to be on Tom's list. He doesn't have to say anything right now. I'm putting it here primarily for graphics. It's a graphical powerhouse. It has ray tracing at 60 frames per second on PlayStation with a lower resolution, but still very, very impressive. And to be honest with you, it looks like a Pixar movie. Is that? And Tom, I really do have a feeling it's going to be on your list eventually, so I don't know how much you want to add here. But
yeah, we can dive into it later. It might come up.
We could dive into it later. It will be making another appearance on the broadcast, everyone. I also liked, for the same reason, really, the independent game. It's like Kenya. She pronounces it very specifically in the game, and I never remember what it is. But it's the game with the girl that looks like also from a Pixar movie and the little spirit sprites that my daughters love a lot. And you go around and collecting them. And again, I thought it was a graphical showcase as an indie game. But unlike some other folks, I find it to be like a little pedestrian. It's just very simplistic. Simplistic in battle, simplistic in exploration, simplistic in storyline. And there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes you feel like that. But that, in case you're wondering, why it's not quite on my top 10. Tom, anything to add there? Have you played this one?
No, my wife did.
Okay.
she really got into PlayStation gaming like the back half of this year. But no, I haven't. I've seen like a little bit of it.
We can mention one thing I know your wife is into that I don't think will be on our list. Who knows? But the Tom Hogue clan has become huge Fortniters.
Yeah, I actually have it on my honorable mention that we can talk about.
Okay.
Obviously, Fortnite isn't even close to new.
Yeah.
But yeah, my family got really into it this year. And I think the game sort of feels better than it has. Also, I'm still a terrible builder, and I probably always will be, and that's fine.
Yeah, you don't need to be able to build. You just need to be able to get the builders into a rough spot and then shotgun them. You know how it is.
That is true. I always carry around a bunch of fireflies and rocket launchers and stuff so that when they start building, I can start breaking.
Now, Casey Harrington, this was an awful year for gaming. I'm going to say I had about 70 games that were in various states of going on my list. So it's an awful year perhaps for AAA gaming. I think there was a lot of cool stuff this year. And by the way, in chat, you want to raise something, if you want to flag us with @HoagLaw, that's the easiest way to see it. We're otherwise going to be conversing, obviously. So if we miss it, I apologize. Also, super chats, always welcome. Definitely not necessary. But those flag us in specific kind of colored tabs as well. But yeah, Fortnite, it's on Tom's honorable mention list. I've played it a bunch. I think people find that funny because I've had interactions with Tim Sweeney. I've covered Epic versus Apple for so long now. And I think if you've been in virtual legality for a while, you can separate, hey, they're doing a lawsuit that I don't think is terribly wise from, hey, I think their product is okay. And so I do play Fortnite regularly with Tom and his family, and certainly with my girls. It continues to be one of the best examples of a living game that adjusts and adjusts and adjusts and gives you something to pop in for every time. Even if you don't love multicolored characters and, R&B and jazz dancing and whatever else they're doing, it's still a lot of fun, and it's very what do I call it, Tom? It's comfortable. You
chill.
Can have a conversation while you play it. It's chill.
Yeah, it's like a phone call that has a game attached.
Right. And I think that can be fun. So the next entry, and this is one that might be on Tom's list. We haven't talked about any of these beforehand. Is Hitman 3 for me? Really a game I thoroughly enjoy. It offers the kind of murder puzzle that I think is handled better in its framework than it is in Deathloop. Spoiler alert for what's not on my list. But it doesn't quite rise to the level for me of being something that I enjoyed in the top 10's place. And that's really the only reason it isn't there. I totally understand if people want to put it first, if it's high on their list. Hitman has just never been a series that gets up there in my stratosphere. You have any thoughts on that, Tom?
I'm really interested to see what your list contains. Just that's all I can say. Are we doing my honorable mentions and notable omissions?
I think we'll do
should I be talking about it now?
I think we'll do them at the same time. You can throw on anything because we don't have slides for you. Okay. So mention anything that kind of pops into your head that relates to this, and then we'll go back to the cameras and we'll talk to you and just what your lists are for these.
So for what it's worth, Hitman 3 also appeared on my honorable mentions. Mostly because I think it's great. I got really into it. I haven't played the content of the third one at all yet because having next gen sort of remasters of all the previous content that I haven't super played, I got really into it. I finished the first one, was moving through the second one. But they're just, they're great. Hitman, the stuff I'm playing isn't even new. So I don't know if that should count. And I can't evaluate Hitman 3 itself.
Yeah, one of the coolest things the Hitman series does is it kind of builds back everything that was in the prior games and puts them into whatever the latest one was. So that's very cool. Hitman 3 has some really interesting puzzles. And if you really get into it and you just decide that you want to own a specific location, you can spend 10 hours going through all the various iterations they have of moving people around and how to do what you want to do. And I think that's really impressive. It's just the way that I play games. I'm not usually saying I want to learn this level for 10 hours, even though they've built that in. So I respect it more than I enjoy it, I think, at the end of the day. So I really like Hitman 3, but I buzzed right through it, and then I kind of went back for a couple hours per level, and that's it. It's kind of done for me. So the next game on my list is Far Cry 6. Everybody's going to yell at me. Oh, we have a super chat. Top 3 lawsuits of the year. That's easy. That's Epic versus Apple. That is California versus Activision. Sorry, Tom. And that is probably it's going to be like the the OSHA mandate lawsuits that are currently buzzing through. Sixth Circuit just said that they're okay. Supreme Court's going to get them next. Something along those lines outside of the virtual legality sphere. We're not really bringing that to the party usually on the channel, but thank you for the super chat. Absolutely. My next is Far Cry 6. A bunch of people are going to have a problem with this, both because Ubisoft also mired in scandal and because Ubi game as a thing isn't loved by as many people as me. I don't know. Do you have any Ubi games on your list, Tom?
I do.
Okay. Is it on your list for the year?
Yep.
Sweet. All right, we'll get back to it. So for me, Far Cry 6 is a very cool world, and I like going and doing the filler quests and interacting with it in a Ubi game. And I'm calling it that because I fully acknowledge that a Ubisoft game across basically all of its franchises has a virtual similarity of feel that I can fully acknowledge while still saying I like them. I find them enjoyable. And I think actually Far Cry 6's Cuba stand-in is one of the better realized ones that I've seen. So that's why it's there. You can see it for open world. It Takes Two, the Game Awards Game of the Year, is on here for co-op. Obviously, it's a tremendous co-op experience. Tom and I got to play it together on the couch. What do you think of It Takes Two, if you can say anything about it right now, Tom?
You may also be seeing it later.
Okay. All right. Well, Tom might not be able to say much on it, but you can,
that's why I'm very excited to see what your list contains.
Okay, so half of my honorable mention list is apparently on Tom's list. We'll see how that goes. But It Takes Two, obviously very inventive, very innovative, a lot of fun. Again, when I'm making my list, it really is, what were the top 10 things that I enjoyed? What were the top 10 experiences I had for the year? Loved It Takes Two. Loved it. Fully recommend it. I'm not regularly in a position to co-op play. I'm not regularly in a position to do that. And so it's never going to be kind of super high on my list. It was a very specialized experience for me. If you're regularly co-oping, if that's something that you enjoy, I think it's going to work better for you. But that's why it's on the honorable mention list, not on the top 10. New Pokemon Snap, probably one of the most played games in the Hogue household. My wife absolutely adores it. She does have a photography business. That might play into it. Don't know. But it is a very significant upgrade and increase for what was one of the best Nintendo 64 camera-based Pokemon spotting games. And so I think New Pokemon Snap deserves more credit than it got in this award season. I wanted to make sure it was on the honorable mention list because I just had a fantastic time with it. Did you play this one, Tom?
I'm aware of it. I tried to kind of sell my kids on it, and they're like, that sounds boring. So no, it wasn't really played. You got the old that sounds boring. Well, one game on my top 10 list gets the my girls don't allow me to play it in front of them. They think it's so boring. So that'll be fun to talk about. Next item on my list, Psychonauts 2. You can see what I labeled it. Number 11. If you ever have made a top 10 list yourself, you've ever looked at these things in the video game landscape, otherwise had these conversations, sometimes you get to the bottom and you got these really difficult decisions. And I think Psychonauts 2 could easily be someone's game of the year. It's a tremendous adventure game. It's tremendously novel. It's tremendously imaginative. I think it represents what Microsoft can do with resources and money at these companies that they're buying, like Double Fine. It just wasn't one of my favorite 10 experiences. Dom, you want to add anything on Psychonauts 2? Yeah, so Psychonauts 2 appears on my notable omissions in terms of I've heard great things. Pretty sure it would be on my list. I didn't play it. And my number 11 was Outriders. Was reorganizing my list a lot. I played a ton of Outriders when it came out. I went back to check out the New Horizon update that they just released and just didn't grab me. I'm pretty sure that I'm done with it. I think the powers and character builds really interesting. I think there's a lot of cool, crazy builds that you can make, but the encounter setup isn't really great. The narrative's kind of, and the original end game, I just really didn't like. I don't like anything that's like a speed run mechanic. Right, and it's important to note they removed the timers. That was their latest update. So I fell off pretty hard, and I don't think I'm likely to go back to it. That being said, I spent a lot of time with it. I see a lot of it's Outriders is one of the most perfect examples of a game that does some stuff really great and some stuff really poor. And so kind of in the middle, hard to say how I feel about it overall.
Yeah, I mean, Outriders, one of the things, if you haven't played it, viewers, is that it really does borrow the Diablo mantra, especially the modern Diablo, of actually having interesting weapons and weird things that they do, and combinations of a kind of specifically small skill set that you earn in a fashion I think is really good. Outriders bounced off me a little bit because if you know anything about me, you know, I don't love bleakness and nihilism.
Super bleak.
And I will say that Outriders is just dark and has very specific thoughts about the nature of humanity when left to its own devices. That I might well be right philosophically. I don't really want to argue that point. It's just not a. You feel like you need a shower sometimes after that. So I don't love it as much as I maybe should for the gameplay elements because I think it's well designed. But that's a good ad, Tom, in terms of Outriders. We do have a super chat. Thank you very much, Renault. It Takes Two was overrated as a family game. References to death, profanity, a teen rating, and a torture scene. How do they beat Nintendo nominees? That's a great question. It's interesting to me when we talk about ratings, and this is movies and video games both, that the psychological, the implications of what is said or what is shown doesn't quite usually rise to the level of triggering some of the things that might otherwise prevent you from getting a lower rating either in a movie or a video game, or here making you ineligible for specific nomination categories. So yeah, I mean, It Takes Two is interesting in and of itself, which is it's talking about kind of a marriage on the rocks and divorce and a magic book that has the parents maybe get back together in a way that, depending on how far you get in the game, is like could be marginally unhealthy. I mean, there's interesting things that happen there from a thematic standpoint. I'm really just evaluating it on it's a super cool game with super cool ideas rather than those elements, but I think they're well taken. And then the last entry on my honorable mention list is a game that I don't know if everybody's heard of. It's a PC game called Slipways, which I understand was actually originally, I want to say it's like an itch.io game or something like that. And it's a 4X game kind of stripped down to just its raw elements. So I have it labeled here as resource management, but it's picking where to set specific logistical pathways between planets in a solar system, galaxy kind of situation, and being able to manage that as the supply chain logistics, which, you know, are a good topic in 2021, get more and more complicated. So I love it. Very simplistic in terms of graphical presentation, but it's also very straight to the point because of that. So I wanted to make sure it got mentioned here. And that's my honorable mentions list. Tom, anything seems silly on there?
Well, like I said, you'll be seeing some of these again.
Okay. And now let's talk about yours.
Now I'm going to hit some honorable mentions that I think are probably on Rick's notable omissions. So that'll be fun. Hey. So the first thing I put an honorable mention for, so this didn't make the list, was Deathloop. I didn't play enough of it to really judge, which may be kind of a damning
I did
review in and of itself. But like a bunch of people that I really trust their opinions, like adored it, best game they've played in years. So I want to come back to it and give it another shot.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Also, Eric Granada says he really loved Spiritfarer. That was last year. But obviously it's new to you when you play it. One of the games that I adored this year was called Lost Words that didn't make any of these lists because I was informed that it came out last year. So I totally understand. Lost Words, fantastic. Spiritfarer, very good. And talk about commentary on the human experience. Continue, Tom.
So this one I had a funny note on, which is Resident Evil Village. I put this here and said, I was kind of enjoying this, and then Rick said he hated it, and I stopped playing. I don't know if that's related.
That's too much power, first of all.
This is the little brother dynamic.
I didn't.
Unfortunately.
Did I say I hated it? Did I?
Or it might have even been worse. You're like, it's not worth getting through. Or something
I don't think
like
it's worth
that.
getting through. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's worse or not. I think that's, yeah. So again, Resident Evil Village, one of the nominees for Game of the Year at the Game Awards. This is one of the ones that I just find inexplicable. And to give my tilt on this, I love Resident Evil. I can basically find something to love about all Resident Evils, including Resident Evil Village. But Resident Evil Village is much closer to the Resident Evil 5, Resident Evil 6 kind of zeitgeist understanding of the spectrum of Resident Evil experiences for me than it is the top tier 2s and 4s or wherever you want to put that. Yeah, I feel bad now. If the story is
maybe I'll just
kind of enjoying it and then I talk to you, that's not the dream.
Maybe after enough of this, enough people telling me you're wrong, I'll get the strength to go back and play it.
Batasog, I appreciate you not knowing who's older. That's me. I'm older by about 3 years. But yeah, okay. Continue with your list.
Let's see. Other things I had. I put the Neo collection on here. The reason it's not eligible is it's pure remaster frame rate. But it's two great games together for a decent price. I haven't played number 2 very much. I got really into 1. I think I got better at like Souls likes or like the more technical combat recently, so I was able to appreciate it much more. And was just really enjoying it.
Yeah, I mean, you love those Souls games. I mean, I think that's important kind of background too. You like the concept of learning an environment and going slowly in every inch of mile, and you play more of those than I do.
Yep. And when I first played Neo, I mostly was doing like chintzy sort of cheese to try to beat guys because I wasn't very good at the combat.
Sure.
And this time around, I got much better at like handling when to do my like recharges and blocks and different stuff. And so it's much more fun when you can manage the simple.
You're way better than me. I watch you on like the PlayStation broadcast. That's how I play these games. All right, I'll give this one to you. We have a super chat from Gecko Gamer. Best bad game, Tom.
So I need definition. That's not like worst game. That's like
let's go. It's kind of objectively bad on a review basis, as far as you can tell. You still enjoy it. Guilty pleasure.
Oh man, you threw this to me, and I don't actually have a good.
Well, since I've been thinking about it, just because we were having this conversation, I can tell you I really enjoy Resident Evil 6. I know people hate that one.
This is best bad game of all time.
Yeah, not of the year. What have you liked that other people don't like?
Still,
what's that game with the talking spaceship that I love so much, Tom? I don't. Jaeger. Oh, Jaeger is terrible. I love Jaeger. Go check that one out. What is it? An Xbox game?
Yeah, I don't know if you'll be able to boot that one up.
I love Jaeger. Yeah, no, I got tons of these. Are you kidding me? I don't. People call me a contrarian now because there's so much stuff that I like that other people don't like. You don't have a choice for this, Tom? Come on.
I unfortunately don't have a good response for this.
All right, you think about that. I want to hear it somewhere in this whole broadcast. All right, you think on that question.
It takes me a very long time to like put together these lists. Like I have to do like review because I don't remember anything. Like
you want a fun game? Put my brother in front of a character creator and ask him to name the character in front of him.
I've gotten better.
Have you? This used to be a 45-minute process. Yep. You're getting the behind the scenes here.
You have to live with that name for the whole game.
Yep.
Like you got to be really sure that's what you want.
Yep. We got a comment from Blue that says plenty of good indie games this year. There'll be indie representation on my list. I promise. So that's definitely the case. You have anything more on your honorable mention list, bud?
Mass Effect Legendary Edition, again, a remaster.
Oh, sure. Big remaster.
Just great to see. I wish I had time to kind of dive into it again. I might
that's
try
good.
anyway.
That's fair.
But I'm glad that it finally came out. We have the Gloomhaven port, like effectively.
I haven't gotten to play that yet. Yeah.
It's a port of a game. Pretty much everyone's heard of Gloomhaven, but it's also probably the best transliteration of a board game to a video game ever. Like they put a lot of care into it. It's
just to pretend that all you have not just played board games of this kind of level. Gloomhaven is a dungeon crawler with a living legacy kind of element. So you're going through a plot line, even in board game form, and they turn this into a pretty darn good video game. I know you assume that they know what Gloomhaven is. I know it's the top game of like the last 5 years. I get that. But you'll see, what is Gloomhaven is one of our chat questions. It's a very popular, very famous tabletop board game that I highly recommend if you can play it on board game. It's very complicated, so you kind of have to be in that space of playing complicated board games. But I haven't played it yet. I do have it purchased. I'm waiting for a Steam Deck. But it is the type of game that would be good to translate into computers doing some math for you.
Yeah, it lets the computer do some of the heavy lifting. It has multiplayer so that like Rick and I could actually play it together. We've done some Gloomhaven sessions, when I've been visiting, but it's not something that we can do all the time. It's a little bit heavy for tabletop simulator. So the dedicated app it's really great. It also reminds me that I'm not particularly good at Gloomhaven. So
it's a bit like taking a calculus test on the fly.
I may need to tone it down.
See, now I got people asking me about Wingspan.
Rick, you may not know this. Rick doesn't like Wingspan in its paper form.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we could talk. We're going to go. This will be an adjunct board game video at some point. I don't love Wingspan. I find it to be a kind of weird economic game that is mostly loved by people because it has a bird feeder rolling thing. But we can differ on that. A lot of people really love Wingspan. So yeah, if you're into board games, you can check that one out. Wingspan, very popular. Gloomhaven, very popular. Anything else, Tom?
Skyrim Anniversary Collection. This is not just me being a shill. Honestly,
yeah, that's shilling now. Yeah,
yeah, and it's I joke because it's like I originally wrote it as like Skyrim 2021. But every time they do a release, even when it's not huge, like I jump back into it. I'm like, this is fun. I like this. I've played the first quest with the Golden Claw or whatever. I don't know, a dozen times. So
beloved.
I just keep popping in there. So I just give it honorable mention. Maybe it doesn't even deserve that. I'm not sure, but I played it and enjoyed it this year. So,
you know what? These are our lists, man. You don't have to defend them to like the zeitgeist or whatever. So
I don't know. People are in the chat like Skyrim. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, it's fine. The chat is going to do what the chat's going to do, Tom.
No, it's true. I'm just hoping that it doesn't make me say anything I shouldn't.
Okay, there you go.
And then, yeah, the last thing on here we already talked about, which is Fortnite. It's not new. I do think that they've improved it over time. This was the start of a new chapter this year. My family got super into it. It's been a fun thing for us to do together. Me and my wife have played a lot together, which we don't normally do. So, yeah, deserves the mention just because I've spent a lot of time on it this year.
Excellent. And is that your honorable mentions?
That is my honorable mentions.
Fantastic. See, things are going great. We're moving right along.
No, it's true. I think honorable mentions alone took like an hour last year. So,
well, there's games to talk about, and some of those games are going to be things that are going to make people a little upset. So, I'm a bit late. Was Tom allowed to say where he's working? You want to announce it again, Tom?
Oh, ZeniMax Online Studios.
Yeah, on a super secret project that he won't even tell his brother about. So take that, ZeniMax lawyers. So this is the you won't see on my list. And some of these are because I don't think they're worthy. And some of these are because I haven't played them enough that I know people are going to ask me about. Specifically those last two. People know I'm a lawyer. And so people assume I play all the lawyer games. And I get to them eventually. But I've played Lost Judgment enough to know that it's going to be great. And probably would be on my top 10 list, but I haven't played enough to put it there. And Great Ace Attorney, I haven't played at all, haven't bought it, because my daughters actually love going through the Ace Attorney games. And we're about halfway through the third game. And it was kind of our deal that I was going to buy Great Ace Attorney when I did. Now, the other games on this list are things that I just didn't think got to that level. The first of which is Deathloop, GameSpot's Game of the Year, which I think might be the most overrated game from the critical class that I can recall in a long, long time. I like Deathloop. I think Deathloop solved a number of design problems that it would have had with figuring out how this thing was going to work. I think in terms of the resources spent on that, they were well worth it. I think the game is well designed from that perspective. I think that playing the game, experiencing the game, and the actual environments that you go through in the game are substandard. I think the AI is bad. I think the actual murder puzzle element isn't great. And I think the environments, I think I described it as someone taking what has to be a series of shortcuts like in a Deus Ex game and sprinkling a BioShock 1960s flavor over the environment. I don't think it's very functional. That comes across as mean. I did enjoy my time with Deathloop. It's like a 7 for me out of 10. But that's how I feel about it. I feel like it's Assassin's Creed and that we can expect great things from Assassin's Creed 2 / Deathloop 2. And that's coming from someone that loves Arcane. Arcane's made some of my favorite games. I love Dishonored. I love specifically Prey. And out of that, I specifically love their DLC Moon Crash, which I highly recommend to everyone on Earth. And that Moon Crash DLC was clearly the progenitor of what they did on Deathloop, only in my opinion, worse. So it won't be on my list. If you loved it, I'm not here to have this conversation to take away your joy. I am sincerely glad, but it doesn't rise to that level for me. Halo Infinite does not rise to the level of Deathloop for me. So Halo Infinite has some really cool concepts. It's a very clean looking game. It's enjoyable in small bits to actually have a firefight with certain sets of enemies in certain specific ways. As a campaign itself, and I'm not really evaluating the multiplayer here. I'm not a multiplayer guy. It seems cool to me. So if you love that for that reason, that's totally fine as well. But in terms of the campaign, it predominantly feels unfinished to me. Or more specifically, like a company that was trying to figure out how to do an open world Halo for a long, long time and then didn't have enough time to actually populate it with a real campaign. That the campaign gets started just as it's ending in terms of plot line, that there's a lot of Ubisofting around there. If you don't like Ubi game, I'm a little unclear how you can really be thoroughly enjoying the Halo Infinite experience. But if you do, more power to you. I keep bouncing off it. I keep playing it for a couple hours and saying I'd rather be doing something else. And that's a problem. I was buzzing through the plot line because I wasn't enjoying kind of the looking for other stuff. And it's a pretty short campaign. It doesn't really go very far in places. And it skips the stuff I like about Halo, the mystery, the wonder, the awe, the stuff that was from the original trilogy that brought me to the franchise in the first place. So I'm very sorry if you love it. Know that I'm just an idiot on the internet saying things. If you continue to love it, I am thrilled for you. But that's why you see Deathloop and Halo Infinite there at the top of my list. 7 out of 10s. I don't dislike 7 out of 10s. I like having 7 out of 10s in my library. They don't get on my top 10 list. So those are those two. Does that make sense in terms of analysis, Tom?
Yeah, I have Halo Infinite on my notable omissions as well. Rick knows that I sort of sent him an unsolicited text when I first started playing the campaign. That was like, hot take, I don't think this is very good. The campaign, I don't know. It's like I loved Halo in its heyday, and I think it's like slowly kind of left that.
Sure.
I think I played some of the multiplayer and that felt, solid and good. And Halo multiplayer feels great. The campaign feels kind of small. I'm not super interested. The game, it's doing, like you said, like Ubi game, but not well. So every time I was playing it, I'm like, all right, maybe I should just go play Far Cry 6.
If you got both of them sitting next to each other, you definitely have that thought in your head.
I have tried a couple times to get into it. Some of it feels decent, but I don't know. When I play Halo Infinite, I mean, like, I think I should go play Far Cry, or I'm like, I think I should go play Destiny, but I'm never like, I want to stay here and play this.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing of it, right? You got a digital library. You're playing these systems. You're always kind of looking at multiple boxes about what you should actually put on your screen. So it's not that Halo is bad. I think Halo is a good game. I think Deathloop is a good game, but you're always constantly evaluating it between, should I turn this on or should I turn that on? And I see somebody ask me the question, how much of a Halo fan would you say you are in general? I think it's really two separate franchises. I was in midnight lines for Halo 2 and Halo 3. Felt those were worthy of that. I've been a fan of the Bungie game for a long time, including the way they told stories through Marathon and Myth and then Halo. That went away with 343. They're a different set of people. This isn't me kind of judging them for that, but it's not what Bungie could do at their prime. So I just haven't liked 4, 5, and now Infinite as much. I think Infinite's a better direction for them to go. Honestly, I do, than 4 and 5, because 4 and 5 felt like they were discount store Bungie Halos, and this feels like something new. I think that much like Deathloop, Halo Infinite can be something more. And I think they intend to essentially put expansion packs in the thing and give you actual stories. So I think that's great. I wish I liked it more day one, because I really do like the cleanness of the visuals. It's not stressing the system too hard, but there's a certain clarity of color that I like. I wish it had biomes. It really doesn't. I wish it felt a little bit less procedurally generated because it does. Vehicles don't work very well, and a lot of the stuff that they built, it's not designed to actually be played, I don't think, in certain form and fashion. So I don't like those aspects. And then, yes, I mean, with that being said, are there any games on this list that are just not good games to you? I'm so glad you asked. I think that we can definitely share a screen on that topic pretty quickly here. Let's see if I can do this correctly. Did that work? Oh, it did work. Wonderful. We're working on new buttons here at the Hoglaw YouTube channel. Let's see how I felt about 12 minutes. 12 minutes, now completed, is bar none one of the worst games I've ever played. Its execrable design is exceeded only by the story it chooses to tell and the way it chooses to tell it. I regret every minute I engaged with or look forward to it. 0 out of 10. Understand that 0 out of 10 is coming from a person that did not actually spend extra money on this game. To give you the context for how we arrived at 12 minutes appearing in the third slot of my You Won't See list. And I only really bring it up, I don't want to slam anybody that made anything, is because 12 minutes was nominated for Best Indie Game of the Year at the Game Awards. I can't fathom it. I literally can't fathom it. It's bad game design. It controls poorly. It is linear to a fault. You repeat yourself 1,000 times in every aspect of what you're trying to do. And at the end of the day, the story it tells is god-awful and would have been rejected from the CW on down at any major media network trying to tell a story of any kind. It would have been rejected as pamphlet material for the free printing you could have gotten at the printing press on the corner. That's how bad 12 minutes is. Tom, did I mess up on any of that?
I'm not as mean as you, but it is also on my notable omissions, and I didn't play it. I watched you play it, and it was terrible. It was real terrible.
It was bad. It's a bad game, and it was on Game Pass. And so you asked me what is bad on this. That's the one thing that's bad on this. Deathloop and Halo Infinite I pulled out to show that it just isn't on my top 10 list. But 12 minutes is god-awful, and even if it's already on your Game Pass, it's not worth your time. The rest of these, Death's Door is kind of similar to Deathloop and Halo Infinite. I just didn't gel with it as much as some people did. I saw it on a bunch of lists, wanted to make sure that was referenced. And Inscription, 1,000 people recommended to me, and I cannot tell you why I didn't get the chance to play it. But I didn't get a chance to play it. That's why it's here. Same as Loop Hero, Great Ace Attorney, and Lost Judgment. That's my list of things you won't see. You got any, Tom?
I talked about Psychonauts 2 earlier. I put Metroid Dread on here because lots of people said it's great, and I didn't get a chance to play it. I put, actually, I don't know if this is eligible, but I put Final Fantasy 14 Endwalker on my notable omissions. Again, I haven't played it.
Because you're in a queue for it right now. You're 10,000 people deep.
I have to respect something so popular that Square actually had to stop selling it to try to right the ship.
Yeah, that's fair. No, Endwalker, that's a good note. Final Fantasy 14, obviously ridiculously popular. But no, I haven't played it. You can't play it unless you really devote your time to it.
Yeah, I heard the queues are like 3 hours right now, and there's a bug that occasionally kicks you out of the queue. So I also have Biomutant on here. I don't know if this is notable. Biomutant. I know a lot of people were hyped for it around me. And I basically hated it roughly 30 minutes into it.
He does hate it. He mentions it from time to time.
It's very clunky. I don't like the way it tells its story. It's like style is probably the coolest thing it's got going for it, but it's not a good game, and I don't like it.
I like Biomutant okay.
And the last one I have on my notable omissions is Valheim.
Very popular, yeah.
This was very popular, but I never really got into it, and I love survival craft games. I'm like a big survival craft gamer. I think the big draw here is that, from what I could tell, it was a lot better multiplayer. It was a lot better with friends. There's just like a lot of really cool, like, working together and crazy stuff happening. And that's not like my style. I don't get to play that way most often.
I mean, that's the thing. It's similar to It Takes Two, right? Like, that could be awesome. It's just not the way our lives are organized right now. And that's the one thing I would say about these lists, too. We talked about Tom having a long year, maybe not playing everything that every one of you have played. And these lists are going to be very emblematic of what we specifically like and what we actually got a chance to play, right? That list of things that is on the You Won't See list that aren't things that I already dislike or that I just don't think are at that level are things that I think could have been, right? Inscription, Loop Hero, Great Ace Attorney, Lost Judgment are things I think could have been on that list for me. They just haven't been played by me enough because we have a limited amount of time. I could show you my list, but I was up in the 60s or 70s of things that I had played enough to judge. And that's pretty good. It's a pretty goodly amount of games in a given year. So that's the nature of the beast here. Tom, anything else before we actually go to our top 10 list?
I don't think so. I think we're ready to go.
All
As we
right.
were talking about this, I was thinking like potentially more honorable mentions, and this is every year, and we've talked about it a little bit, which is like stuff I played either for the first time or like for in its most first time seriously. This year, definitely, I think there were some of those, especially with next gen updates and things like that. So there's probably some stuff I haven't mentioned that I'm not thinking of that I actually spent a decent amount of time on this year. But here we
Yeah,
are.
I know you were playing Final Fantasy VII. Did you stick with that?
Nope.
These are
I can't
setups.
explain
These are
why
questions that are not to be answered in one word, man.
I keep bouncing off of it, and it's not, like I recognize that it's good. Like I play it, I'm like, this is good, and then I play something else. I don't know why. I don't. It's. I think partially what I've got now is whenever when you've like restarted a game like 3 or 4 times, and so now you're very, very, very familiar with like the first 5 hours.
Sure. And it's
I
hard to
keep
get past that hump.
I keep hitting that, and they're like,
Well, you're a pretty chronic restarter too. Like I'll
I
tell
am.
you to just pick up The Witcher 3 and just go. And you struggle with that kind of thing.
I got through the Witcher 3's like first little bit, and I feel good about it.
You're done? You're
I'm sure
done
there's
witchering?
I'm sure there's more interesting stories and stuff, but that was still very solid, and I liked it.
Tom has completed The Witcher 3.
And it tells a nice whole story.
So you're not going back. You'll go back to it when they give you the next gen update, right? No.
Yeah, I think that's probably my plan.
Okay.
Um,
All right. Well, it's time to get into it. I think the way that this is going to work is I do have my list kind of in slides and the way we can look at it kind of together. And then if you see something that I put on and it's on one of your numbers, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually change your list, which I haven't seen in advance, on the fly. And then we're going to be able to fill out yours as it goes. So that's what I think is our plan here. So we'll be starting with mine. If you see something that pops up on your list, we'll put it in, and then we'll go back to that number for where I just did to talk about your list after mine in the second slot. Does that make sense, Tom?
Nope, I really 100% didn't follow what you just said, but
Cool.
I understand that when you say a thing, if I have that thing, I'm telling you.
All right, and then I'll prompt you for your number in your list. Okay, bud? All right, well then let's get to it. Number 10 game of the year here, a late arrival onto the list, making itself known to me, is the game Chorus. If you aren't familiar with this came out, I don't even know, a week ago, 10 days ago. And bear with me, folks, we're about to get fancy. So check this out. Oh, that's right. That's a picture of the Corvus box. And if you don't know this game, it's about space. It's about space combat. If you're familiar with some older games that were popular in video games, it reminds me a little bit of Colony Wars or a game where you're interacting with multiple factions and getting into dogfights and having a story told to you. It's very focused on that story. I can get even fancier here, Tom. Check this out. And it is really, really, really well done, in my opinion. I did see some reviews out there that didn't love that it was so focused on narrative. Obviously, I've already told you my tilt on this, but it is really well done. It gives you this feeling of space flight. It gives you this kind of dogfighting combat maneuvers feeling. And I don't know that Tom has actually gotten far enough in the game. It does some wonderfully Star Wars-esque things of flying into bigger things, blowing up reactor cores, doing that kind of thing that I love. And this is my personal tilt, right? I love space. I love space combat. This is essentially space fantasy more than sci-fi. It's talking about magic and cults and things like that. But if you're at all interested in this, if you're at all interested in kind of just the concept of a space combat game that's reminiscent of the old PlayStation glory days of Psygnosis in its prime, I really do think Chorus, which is a budget title, is really thoroughly excellent and has earned every bit of its number 10 place on my list. Tom, how do you feel about Chorus?
Number 4.
What? Hold on. Everything changed just now. It's on your list in the 4 slot? I wasn't even ready for that box.
Yep. So first of all, I have an incredible tilt for space shooters, for space flight games. Like, they're probably one of my favorite genres, super underrepresented for a very long time. If we were doing this the year that Everspace released, I would have said that. I have very strong suspicion that whenever Everspace 2 releases, I'm going to say that is on my list. I love space combat. Chorus does it very well. Its lore is a little bit odd and self-serious, and that's probably a turnoff for some people.
I think I call it po-faced. Yes, it's very earnest.
But at the same time, it lets you do like magic in your ship, so you like teleport and do like crazy stuff, which is really cool. So yeah, it definitely. I only started playing this a little bit ago. It has been mainly what I've been playing for the last week or so. I really like it, and it does some fun stuff that I love with space physics. So you're doing some like flipping around, so you're like moving one direction and shooting another, and I really love it. I could take or leave the narrative a little bit. I think something more digestible would probably be.
But can you whisper talk the rest of your review of Chorus?
Yeah, I know. It's just I love Chorus, and people won't understand this.
They won't understand this bit. So one of our most amusing parts of the way the story works is the internal monologue for the main character is told in very aggressive whispers, which I basically want to take into my own legal field. And just have my own inner monologue just be very aggressively whispered at myself. So I'm working on that. That's going to take some training. But certainly it's the kind of thing that might turn you off. I will say the actual space fighting, the way they've done the controls, the way they've used the rights, which are the magic spells, along with those, very, very cool feeling, very well done. And if you like these games, I don't know that I could recommend it more. Now, it is effectively open world. Kind of, you'll get these kind of spots. This is the first system, and there'll be, there'll be a star over here and a question mark you can go look at, and this will be a quest, and this will be a quest, and this will be the main storyline. So it is a little bit like your Far Cry's or your Halo Infinites or your Ubi games in general, all in a spaceship. So that's Chorus. I actually can't believe this is wild to me. This is great. This is you've made the case for the mystery of your list already.
This is why we do this.
So yes, it is my number 10. And then I think the plan was, before I knew we were getting an entry so high on your list, was now after we talked about Chorus, hopefully sold it to people. Sean Hoke here in the comments in the chat says Chorus has a demo on Steam. Check that out. My computer has no chance of running that. But I'm playing it on the Xbox Series X. It runs like a dream there, in case you're wondering. What's your number 10 game of 2021, Tomo?
I feel like I wanted to say something else about Chorus, but no.
Oh, sure.
It's cool. But yeah, definitely highly recommended for people like I said, space shooters. Just there aren't many, and there are even less good ones. There's been a few that I've been. Well, not really even a few. Oh, I remember what I wanted. So there have been a few I've been excited for that ultimately disappointed. Sorry, my brain.
No, that's great.
Chorus is actually made by Fish Labs.
Yes. Is that a company I should know?
I know them because they used to make space shooters for mobile called Galaxy on Fire, which are actually pretty good. And there are PC versions of the voice acting and narrative is it's not great, but the game itself is solid.
I will say for Chorus's benefit, it is po-faced. It is self-serious. I find it to be well acted.
I think that's fair. Yeah, I think that's good. I agree. And if you'd played Galaxy on Fire, it's nowhere near that kind of cheesy. What I was going to say is Fish. Now, I need to look into this. I don't know what I'm exactly talking about here, but I thought that Fish Labs became Rockfish and made Everspace. And that, I guess, isn't the case.
Okay.
Or some of the people from Fish Labs went and formed Rockfish. And that's so I was just really surprised to see that. Thought that was interesting.
Well, I'm happy to get Everspace and Chorus. So a winner is us, I think, on that score. But yeah, Chorus was one of those that was pretty funny. I was playing it and I was like, I sent Tom a text. I said, try Chorus. And he's like, oh my God.
Yeah. I was like, why do I not? How do I not know about a next gen space shooter? In what world?
So highly recommended. Definitely, if your computer can run the demo, there is no reason to not try it. You don't have to take our word for it. in my LeVar Burton stylings. You could check it out for yourself. But Chorus, I thought I was going to get chastised by my brother for putting up a game that I've only had for 2 weeks on the top 10 list. Instead, he puts it in the 4 spot. I love it. Now, what's your 10 spot?
Dungeon Encounters, all caps.
Dungeon Encounters,
all caps.
It's all caps.
That's the official. The official title is in all caps.
We're gonna do this without caps.
We're going off the edge.
Yes, it's all fun and games live here. Let's see. Right, I need to make this smaller.
Oh God, what is happening? You guys are seeing behind the curtain. Look away.
Oh God, you're killing me. All right. Well, you know what? It's Dungeons. It's Dungeons now.
Dungeon Inks.
Anyway, so yeah, you're good God.
Oh God, it's getting worse. Oh, what is happening?
See, you try to do this stuff. This is live broadcasting. Leave me alone.
You've been screwing around too long. The chat is on you.
Now, it's fine. It's fine. Now here is where we get fun, right? Because I wasn't planning on doing this, but I think maybe we should just throw up my number 9 as it comes out, which means, buddy, you get the whole thing now.
Oh, I get that. Yeah, so Dungeon Encounters, I guess I'll start by saying it's not for everyone. I watched videos of it. I watched people playing it. I could not understand why people would do that. My wife looked over at one point and said, "Are you playing Sorry by yourself?" It is just it's super engaging for some reason. Like you're putting together this little party and you're raising their levels and you're just kind of exploring this like huge dungeon. It like does what it says on the tin. Doesn't do a lot of fancy
Dungeon Encounters. Yes,
it doesn't do anything like really fancy beyond that. It's got an active battle system, which is super nostalgic in terms of like waiting for people's bars to fill and then doing their little attacks. And it's got a few interesting battle mechanics in terms of like things will have physical defense and magical defense and also their HPs. So you're kind of encouraged to maintain sort of the ability to do.
Let's back that out a sec, because I think this is really the most engaging part, but it's also the reason why like my girls can't watch it. So this game lives entirely like in your head,
in your mind. Yes.
In how you're like framing this out. So this down here, you look like a broadsword. These symbols are all what kind of damage it's going to do. It's going to do physical, whether it has to be close combat, whether it's going to be random or specific. So a number of these are going to do a specific amount that you're guaranteed to get. But it's only ever that. And then there's another type of weapon that'll be a random number between, 1 and...
I believe it's 1 and whatever the high number is.
Yeah, so when we go back and we look at these encounters, they've got physical defense and magic defense. You can go either way. They're essentially 2 different shields. And then once you get through one of them, you can start hitting the HP. And they're doing stuff back to you at the same time. But it means that your group is going to have to manage these things, because what the game can do is it can just give you a group that's a super high magic defense. So if you built your team in the wrong way, then you're going to have a real problem with that particular encounter. And you're going to learn the encounters as you go through the dungeons, and they're going to be represented by these numbers, right?
Yep.
And this is the most boring thing in the world. This is the game that my girls won't let me play because they say, well, what is this even? But if you can get into it, if you can get into the headspace, then all of this is super cool. And it's all kind of just built on its own rules. It doesn't tell you how to do things. You just kind of figure out what works and what doesn't work. These Z, Y, and X locators are telling you where people are. And if you lose a whole party, the game doesn't end. You go back to the academy with your lower level people, and you have to send out the group to try to bring the dead bodies home and get them back and going. And it's all just very evocative in a very old school way. And if you get into it, to me, it's like playing Civilization or something. I started playing it and it was midnight before I realized it. And that's one of my favorite things in games. If they can engage you at that level. And I just spent, 40 minutes at the top of this video telling you I'm a narrative guy. This has no narrative at all. This is purely systems. This is essentially, I believe it's the designer of Final Fantasy 12. coming in and saying, I got some cool ideas for systems. And this is effectively the resources Square gave him to go explore them. Now, I'm still happy they exist. I still think it's great. But yeah, these things are kind of nice looking. They're good art, and they'll bang into each other. The boxes will hit each other. So, it's animated. It's 2021. But I think this game is $20. Is it 20 or 30, Tom?
That's good. I mean, I can look it up on Steam. That's where I have it.
But I mean, it's a budget priced game, and it is so engaging, and it is so fun. And this looks procedurally generated. It's not. It's all handcrafted. They'll have specific things you can find that are riddles to where to locate special treasures that match the way that a specific dungeon looks, or other things. Throughout, you're going to get magic powers that let you go up and down dungeons that can get you to places that you couldn't otherwise reach in the level themselves. It is very, very engaging, even though it looks the way it looks. So
Dungeon
I'm thrilled.
Encounters is currently $24 on Steam.
$24. I highly recommend it, but you definitely need to know what you're getting into. It's only ever going to look this good, right? It's only ever going to look this way. And this is it. And most of your game is going to be spent in this kind of stuff, right? The reason I pulled up this slide is you're going to be evaluating these kinds of things, and it feels great to grow. If you like that feeling of growth in Dragon Quest, of being able to beat the things you couldn't beat before, and your people getting stronger, and having a little bit of edge of potential loss. Like if you're running with the last 3 people in your academy, if you lose those people, your game actually ends. And so you're like very careful and cautious in trying to sneak through and all these things. If you like the sound of that at all, highly recommend it. Pure mechanics, pure battle system, and it's my number 9 game of the year. It's Tom's number 10 through adventures in typeface, but it is Tom's number 10 to go with his number 4 of Chorus. So look at this, 2 entries in both lists. So we're doing all right. Anything to add on Dungeon Encounters?
No, I mean, I don't think so. Like I said, if you're looking at this, it is not compelling in video, screenshot. Like really, it's a game that lives in your head, and so I can't. You won't be able to see it before you are in it. And assuming that it's not for everybody, I apologize for the people that get into it and are like, this is stupid, I hate this. But Steam does have a 2-hour return policy, so get in there, give it a try.
Yeah, you'll be able to tell in 2 hours. I think you'll get into floor 1. You'll be able to see what it's all about. Somebody asked here, so there's necromancy for bringing them back. Is it necromancy? There's a resurrection shrine. It's the way a Dragon Quest works, or anything else. So you drag them back and you say, yes, please resurrect that. It might be Pet Cemetery, depending on how it is. We can't tell. It's all just boxes.
But again, to Rick's point on like living in your head, the resurrection shrine is like 5, and the healing shrine next to it is a number 6.
Yeah. So this black number is an encounter, and it's an encounter that will always come from the same pool of enemies, and you'll be collecting a log, and it'll tell you what enemies can appear in that encounter. It's not identical. It's not the same every time. But you'll be able to know, okay, I have to avoid a 66 with this crew, but I can rock a 52. And you'll eventually know that the 2 is, I think, go upstairs, and 34 is something specific as well. And you can see you can't walk to this one, right? So you're going to have to come to it either from the upper floor or the lower floor. And if I sound excited about this stuff and you think this sounds ridiculous because you're looking at what I'm looking at, I totally get that. But when you're trying to get past these ghouls and you haven't been able to find the right weapon to do it, and you're growing and everything else, it is tremendously fulfilling to do. And every 10 levels, they change the background color. So, I mean, that's service. That's customer service for you. I think they also changed the background sound effects.
Yeah, so I do think there's definitely different battle music.
See, look at that. That's value. So no, like I said, my girls won't let me play this game. Don't understand it. I don't blame them one bit. Lives in the player's head. But if you're at all interested in it, if it sounds interesting, check it out. Gecko Gamer says in Super Chat, Dungeon Encounters looks like and sounds like an early Western RPG pre-Ultima 4. Yeah, I think of it as a mapping. It's one of those mapping dungeon games where it was just a town and it was just a dungeon, and you were mapping it on your graph paper. And fortunately, you don't have to do that for this game, but it's the similar kind of concept where the value is in just in your head. Oh, I'm going through a dungeon. I'm having these encounters, and I'm having a great time. I absolutely love it. One of my favorite games of the year, and one of Tom's favorite games of the year. So we're doing all right, which means because Tom took my number 9, he's also up again. Let's see if we can type it better.
I wasn't sure how we were doing this. Is it like
I got
lowest valid number?
Yeah,
all right,
just,
so
I
know this won't appear on your list. So
okay.
Far Cry 6.
Far Cry 6. I'll see if I can pull up some pictures. Start talking about it.
Sure. I like Ubi Game for what it's worth. I like the Far Cry series. I think when I first started playing this, kind of what I said to Rick is I think they're much more at home in kind of like the jungle. Like it feels like a very detailed space with full of a lot of different things to find and do. I feel better about fighting, the I don't know I can't remember what the name of the bad guys in 6 is over the sort of Peggies from 5.
Yeah, just the government.
So I dive in and I'm like, I'm only going to play it for a little bit, and I end up playing it for a long time. I am a person who chases bubbles, who like, there's a thing on the map, I'm going to go find it and then do that thing and then do the next thing and then do the next thing. It is certainly not without its flaws or weirdness in terms of like you've got a bunch of like animal companions that you're working with, and you also have a backpack that can like fire missiles. I mean, it's over the top, almost Just Cause levels of kind of like zany.
It is almost Just Cause levels in part.
I think it's really fun. And also I think their economy is really good. So you're getting a nice drip feed of new attachments and new weapons and new things to try. Your inventory feels constantly too small to kind of have everything that you want, which I personally feel is great. The combat, it feels the best that they've done so far.
Now so devil's advocate here. So some people say Far Cry 6, which has like now the not armored and armored ammo and keeping track of that kind of stuff, detracts from the overall experience. Do you have any feelings on that, game designer?
I don't mind it. I actually kind of like it, but it does restrict your loadouts a little bit because you're like, oh, I need some way to deal with soft targets and hard targets. Kind of. I actually feel like it doesn't, in some ways, it doesn't push enough. Like I often have a armor piercing silent something, and I can usually use that to take out huge portions of an encounter because a headshot with an armor piercing weapon is still a kill. Doesn't matter. Like, and that works on soft targets and hard targets. Because it doesn't matter. So, I don't know. I don't like artificial hard counters or hard locks personally.
I know you've said that before.
So I don't love that. But I don't hate it either.
Okay. Very non-committal. Well, I mean, to me, the reason it was on my honorable mention list is not the combat, is not the shooting, which I find to be fine. It was that I thought the world was well realized. I agree with you that fighting on an island chain feels right for Far Cry. It felt right in the original. It felt right in 3. It feels right in 6. And then this combines that with the notion in Far Cry 4 of toppling a regime, which I think in terms of the game that they have built of what a Far Cry is, toppling a regime is the thing that makes the most sense. Much like Just Cause, causing chaos, doing things around the island, getting people upset with what is being offered to them makes the most sense for what you're actually doing. More sense than like being in Montana and dealing with those kinds of situations.
If I had one complaint so far, it's, well, 2 complaints, I guess. It's probably that the structure is too similar to 5, in my opinion. It's like, here's the 3 lieutenants, and you're going to go to their areas, and you're going to do stuff, and then you're eventually going to fight the lieutenant, which I don't even think like previous Far Cries exactly did. So it felt like very, very similar to 5. And also there's just not enough, and I'm going to butcher this, Giancarlo Esposito. You only really get him in a few scenes, and then mostly through like over like PA systems and stuff.
He does do announcements.
And I think some more interaction with him would be great. And maybe I'm going to get some. They're big games. I finished one area or one like lieutenant.
Yeah, UB does not make their screenshots very easily found. So they like movies and video. So I got one screenshot just at the time that we're ending our conversation. So I
Nice.
feel like I nailed it.
Nice.
But yeah, I agree with you, except that they also do one of my favorite things in video games, which is the way that you get those scenes at all are like the check-ins with how the evil baddies are feeling about what you're doing. And I used to love these in an old game series called the Strike games, Urban Strike, Jungle Strike, Desert Strike, where you would essentially have cutscenes in between your levels about how the bad guys feel about you destroying all their stuff. I've always liked that.
And Saturday morning cartoon. Starscream.
Yes,
oh God,
exactly.
We both did that.
We did the same one. It's good. We're
both
brothers.
Oh,
so I think that plays pretty well, and you do go through significant things in the various aspects of Yara / Cuba,
Yara.
and then that's when a scene will pop up of the lieutenant saying, "We're doing our best against the crazy person," and then he'll shoot someone. And I think that's well done. He's obviously a very charismatic and captivating actor, and I think he does well in the game. But yeah, he's kind of the ghost presence. He's the emperor while you're otherwise handling things. But I think even in that context, Ubisoft has gone farther with putting character around their missions in Far Cry 6. The way that they're delivered to you, I think works better. You have a little bit more context, even if, end of the day, mostly it's burn all the trucks or shoot all the people or whatever it's going to be. They add that context. I think it works well. I do have a little bit more of a problem with the ammo switches than you do. I also have a little bit more of a problem with the tonal shifts, right? You do get Giancarlo doing really bad stuff in his scenes and being evil and dark and oppressive and setting up a very serious kind of context. And then in the game, you're getting wacky chicken races and you're getting hitting things with fireworks and you're getting goofballs all over the place. And that's what Far Cry has become, but it really doesn't pick a lane and they don't really gel terribly well together. So it's interesting that you just kind of do both at the same time, when I think one or the other would have been maybe a little bit better, although I don't think they want to become Just Cause. The last thing I will say is it is maybe my favorite intro video of any video game this year. If you haven't played it, Far Cry 6 begins with what amounts to a Netflix kind of premiere television introduction with some really cool music and like some nice weird artistry, almost like a James Bond kind of thing with like montages of what is happening on the island. And honestly, one of the things I wound up thinking is I wish I could play the game with that tone like the whole time because it's very kind of cool. And Far Cry 6 is not the game that introduction kind of promises.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Actually, I had that as more of a complaint in 5, which I think was even more sort of like mission to mission can be zany. You're dealing with like this drunken idiot or some.
You do a lot of that, yeah.
And then you go through a cinematic where like someone's tortured, and it's like this is really dissonant. So I can see that. I think Far Cry 6 does a better job. I think even the sort of zany stuff that I've done so far, it's sort of like it's part of the stuff you're doing for the Resistance, and it like has some sensibility. Like for example, you do these things called supply runs or whatever, where you have to get a car from A to B in a certain amount of time, or whatever. Actually, that's not even what I'm thinking of. What I'm thinking of is these like checkpoint things that you have to do where you like fly a plane through a bunch of things or a wingsuit or whatever. And in Far Cry 6, they're kind of like Resistance training things that you have to do, and they kind of feel in world. In Far Cry 5, they were like some Evel Knievel character who you were basically like pretending to be. And so like it feels like at least 6 is a little bit. I think you're right. I'd still steer it a little bit more probably serious, because I think they actually do a pretty good job with that.
Yeah, I think their serious stuff is good. It's just wild. It's out of nowhere.
But yeah, I really enjoy it minute to minute. And I guess the ammo thing doesn't bother me. I haven't noticed it a lot. I don't know if I'm just like cool with switching really fast, or if it's just like I don't care that much. Like, oh, I'm not doing full damage to this guy. Cool, I'll just lay into him. Like, whatever.
Yep. I think
they're like soft counters, not like hard counters. It's not like, you can't kill this guy if you don't have the right ammo.
I don't think a Far Cry game in general is what I would describe as hard. It's mostly putting the time in and working through them. So I think that's a fair comment, but I do know people have complained about it. So I wanted to ask you the question because it appears on your list and it is in my honorable mention list. So we do have a non-match here, in case you thought that we had somehow coordinated this. We did not. But I do really like Far Cry 6. I do enjoy it thoroughly. Anything else?
No, I think we got that one. I think we hit that one pretty good.
Okay, well then, by the way we're doing this, it's time for my number 8. You have any guesses what might be 8?
Me?
Yeah, just curious.
I feel like if I guess, I'm giving away my list a little bit.
So all right, then don't guess. Don't guess. All right, my number 8, I think, is wildly underrepresented on end of the year game lists. It is one of my favorite. I think it's imaginative, and it just announced that it's coming out on Switch next year, so I can't recommend it more. It is the game Wildermyth. And if you don't know anything about this, I can't blame you, because I don't think that anybody has said much of anything about it, at least until the award season, where people have been mentioning it a little bit more. Wildermyth is, unlike Dungeon Encounters, a procedurally generated RPG thing that allows you to make all these characters in very detailed formulations and figure out exactly what their relationships are, what they're going to be, and work through an RPG that is essentially built out of a set of, I don't know what you'd call them, modules that are written to allow your characters that you've created to interact based on the personalities you've given in specific ways that set the story going in a specific path. And if that sounds like too much procedural generation that it couldn't possibly work, I agree with you. The trick to Wildermyth is that it's a great game that it does work in. And they just had some brilliant ideas to put their cutscenes in this kind of comic book form that can adapt to what characters you create and fill these things out. They even have modules that I think allow you to kind of write in on yourself these kinds of storylines. And so it means that you've got a great RPG that you're playing with really interesting characters and mechanics that's fully functional in a kind of, I don't know, it's kind of an XCOM light type of way. These are essentially treated as paper crafts that kind of bang into each other, but still look pretty cool. It's got a 3D, 2D thing going on. And I can't guarantee your game or your story will be awesome in any given instance. I can guarantee it will be unique, and unique in such a way that it can be really, really interesting and fulfilling, and in a manner that I can't say is identical to any other game I've ever played. So if that interests you at all, an RPG, and there's some other strategy things, I didn't pull up a picture of the strategy map, unfortunately, that you're walking through various areas. You've got a kind of, again, an XCOM strategic to go with a tactical kind of concept, but with characters that you created for yourself. If you like any of that, I couldn't recommend it more. It works terribly well. And it's the kind of game that my computer can play. It doesn't tax it too hard. It just provides good times and cool stories. And I have to thank my brother, who had it on his computer and shared it with me, or else I might not have known about it. What do you think, Tom?
Wildermyth did not make my list.
Okay. Cool. It's wrong, but that's fine.
I respect and like the things that you pull out, actually, about the story generation, its ability to do the story generation and character interactions and stuff. I think the big downside for me is I don't like the core combat really very much. I think it's muddy and kind of hard to, you compare it to XCOM, which I think has a very strong combat engine. And I think this one is kind of like, maybe okay. You're doing kind of some weird stuff.
Functional.
Sometimes you just get RNG'd in an unfortunate way, which I guess is XCOM, but I feel like it's even less preventable here because there's not really like cover or much awareness. Like the maps are really small. You kind of just like stumble into a guy and suddenly you're all wailing on each other.
Yeah, it's lighter in design than XCOM, I think, by choice. I mean, they're more interested, if you have to just define Wildermyth by a sentence, they're more interested in telling a story than they are in this aspect of it. So this is kind of more lightly designed to be a little bit more beer and pretzels, popcorn, whatever word you use for that, than something that's like knee deep in the weeds. And that makes it a little bit more fuzzy around the edges.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is, like, I would prefer Wildermyth if it had like Dungeon Encounters battle system. I think would have been more appealing to me. I don't think the tactical layer is particularly good or fun. I don't like it, and it's a lot of what you're doing.
It's prettier than Dungeon Encounters.
You're kind of guiding your way through these stories, but then they almost all resolve with like, now I'm fighting this thing.
Yeah, they do. There's a lot of fighting as the resolution of these things, definitely. But it's hard to put into words exactly the kind of ownership that you have when you've built these things up. when they've developed these relationships. You're going to answer these kinds of things, and then somebody's going to become agitated with somebody else, and that's going to all go into your history in a way that I think people build in their minds for something like XCOM, and this one kind of takes that as the jumping off point and does something that I think is even potentially a little bit cooler. Anything else, Tom?
No. I think that's totally fair. I recognize it. It definitely was on my list of things to consider. And obviously I played it. I hooked you up with it, and you ran with it.
I ran with it. Yeah. Is this story equivalent to Darkest Dungeon? No, they have big pack. I mean, the easiest way to think about this is almost like a Dungeons and Dragons kind of book with like scenarios attached to it. So it's pulling things that are already built to give you these stories when you're going to a new tower or whatever, with an overall plot line that's built from the book that you selected. So Dungeons and Dragons, Hero Quest, if you're familiar with how that works, it's more along those lines. And it means that I can't tell you how any given campaign, which is a little bit lofty of a word for what they are, will go for you. But it doesn't have a story long game of that type. So it's a different animal than a Darkest Dungeon, definitely. And with that, I think what we can do is we can move on to, we don't have your number 8 yet, right?
I think
so let's get your number 8 in there.
So this one's a little weird one because it came out this year, but I think I started playing it like 2 years ago. Griftlands.
Griftlands? Did that come out of early access this year?
It did. It came out of early access this year.
Okay, I think I can find pictures of that.
I think it started like 2 years ago.
All right, well, talk to us about what the heck a Griftland is.
So it's by Clay. So the art is fantastic.
What does Clay make?
Clay is Don't Starve, Oxygen Not Included, the one where you've got the 2 knives that I can't remember right now, Mark of the Ninja. Like, they have a very distinct style. The knives guy one, it's like a silly title. It's like Brawn or like Stab or something. Invisible Ink, highly underrated. If you've never played Invisible Ink, you should go play it. It's great. Shank, that's what it is. Thank you, Sean. So anyway, their art's fantastic. It's I guess what I'm going to call, it's one of these roguelike deck builders. Slay the Spire is really the most obvious one, but basically where you get a hand of 5 cards and you're trying to manage like what the other team is doing. This one's interesting in that it has 2 different kind of battle systems. What Rick's showing right here is a physical battle. You're actually like fighting something, but actually probably the majority of your battles are like arguments. So it's the same concept. There'll be kind of like things that the other guy's trying to argue, and you're trying to kind of like, there's the arguments battle, and you're trying to I
got your back, man.
You're trying to like undermine or like defeat their arguments, and you use that to convince characters to do things for you. There's a great minor spoiler. There's one enemy you fight where you can kind of give him basically like a crisis of conscience right before you fight by doing one of these conversation battles first. And it's really well put together. It's a really solid sort of deck builder thing. There's got a lot of interesting cards and synergies. I actually think it also tells like an interesting story and has, you get different quests you can go on that tie to it. You can basically kill or befriend any character, and that will cause other characters to feel differently about you and kind of affect how your game plays out. I really love it. I want to spend more time with it. It's got, I think, like 3 or 4 stories, which are pretty large, and I've only ever played the first one.
Yeah,
and not to completion.
Yeah, that have like their baseline powers. Yeah, well, I think it's a good pick. I like Griftlands a lot. It didn't even cross my mind because it was out in early access for so long. That's the problem with early access. I didn't even think that it released this year necessarily. But I think it's a good pick, definitely. That's it. That's all the screenshots I got.
Cool.
So that's a good number 8, I think, and a lot of fun. So I think that's a great choice, Tomo.
Thanks. I appreciate your
I know
encouragement.
you're constantly craving my affirmation. I know that about you.
Yeah, that's all we talk about.
So, all right, let's hit number 7. My number 7, Tales of Arise. So, as you can probably tell from my description of myself, love a narrative as I do, I love RPGs. And I've loved the Tales series for a long time. Tales is that kind of beer and pretzels popcorn RPG. Chances are when you start a Tales game, and even if you just watch the intro video to it, you know 90% of what's going to happen, the fights that are going to happen, who the bad guys are, who the good guys are, fire and ice, light and dark, all that kind of stuff. The details will change, and that's where some of the fun lives. But a Tales of Arise game isn't designed to surprise. It isn't designed to be controversial or anything like that. It's designed to do what it says on the tin. Here's a anime-based JRPG of an old school variety, the kind you've been playing since the PlayStation at least. And now with Tales of Arise, with something that is approaching modern graphics. In fact, it's one of the prettiest games of the year, in my opinion. And so you combine those things with a game type that I already liked and a graphic system, which I believe is also used in another RPG that didn't make my list called Scarlet Nexus, which I also really enjoyed. And you get exactly what I want out of a specific type of role-playing game, which is, battles against monsters, light versus dark, good versus evil, rebellions versus empires, and now with graphics that are as good as anything on the system, in my opinion. So Tales of Arise, pretty simple to explain. It's the same kind of combat system that prior Tales of game done better. It's the same kind of bright colored monster-based, dungeon-based graphics, only done better. It's the same kind of anime tropey characters, only done better, especially if you like Final Fantasy. You'll get Jesse from Final Fantasy VII Remake as well as Noctis from Final Fantasy 15 as your leads. And it's just a good time. Now, it's not higher on my list, despite my love of RPGs, because it gets a little bit, I don't want to even say repetitive, but it's just so clear as to what direction you're going that it is simplistic enough that it doesn't rise to the level of what surprise and controversy can get to you. So it sits nicely here as one of my favorite games of the year. Never really challenged me in terms of narrative or things like that. So a lot of cool skits, what they call in the Tales series, with interactions between characters, a lot of good mechanics, a lot of great graphics, and some good voice acting. And that makes it my number 7 game of the year. Tom, you watched me play some Tales. I know you don't love it like I do.
I don't even know if I watched...
What?
I said, I don't even know if I watched you play the game proper. I watched you play the demo which I think is a little bit messy because it's trying to show you so much that it...
Oh, yeah, I hate those demos. I hate demos that just kind of launch you into the full featured battle set. I need those early sequences to get me up to speed for the 17 things that I can do when I'm fully powered. So you can speak to the graphics, but outside of that, I know you don't love Tales like I do. Did you wind up even giving this one a try?
I did not actually. I have not played it beyond I did try the demo a little bit. I think the battle system seems solid. It's gorgeous. There's no argument that it's gorgeous. But even in the demo, there's a little bits. I was like, I don't know if this narrative is going to be something that I'm super going to like. And I feel like an RPG lives so much on that, like a JRPG in particular. So I never really engaged with it. I've never engaged with any of the Tales games, to be honest.
I like this is funny. If you watch these chats, I am. I liked it, but was disappointed. It's long in the tooth. This is as simplistic as Dragon Quest. It's the most tropey and everything wrong with modern anime that turns people off with constant stopping to re-over-explain. I obviously wouldn't go quite that far. I will say it definitely does suffer from the, I don't know what you'd say. It's like, you know what you're going to do in the city. You know what you're going to accomplish. You know how you're going to beat these bad guys, whatever. And you'll get 7 conversations that talk about the same thing, give or take, over and over and over again, which can be okay if you add a little bit something new, but it definitely overemphasizes, explores whatever it is that you're gonna be doing in that scene. So I do agree with that. Which character do I main for comment? Tales games, I'm bad. I'm always whoever they put me in as first. I feel like Tales of Arise was a game I tried and didn't get into for some reason. Yeah, I mean, I think it starts off pretty slow. It starts off in one specific area of a very specific type, fighting fairly simplistic enemies. So I don't blame anybody for having that particular bounce off of it. I was excited for it. I like Tales games. Again, it's very tropey. I'm not going to disagree with that. It's kind of what it sells you is you know what you're going to get. It's going to be some new locations. There's going to be some wonder and awe, some cool cities, some cool graphics. But it's not what you buy to be surprised or challenged in the storytelling. So I get all those complaints. They just don't rise to the level, no pun intended, of keeping it off my list.
Yeah, it's funny actually. As I was putting together my list, and we'll talk about this more, I think, as we go. Some of my higher entries, I think, have very strong narratives, and that's pretty uncommon these days. It feels like, and it's definitely not something that I don't focus on it in terms of like has to be a good narrative to be a good game. And I think that didn't always used to be the case. And Tales of Arise strikes me as one that may have like solid gameplay, gorgeous graphics, but doesn't tell a story that I'm like super excited about.
You're going to go collect the energy orbs and take down the bad guy. You know what it is. It's Tales of Arise. I did see someone else mention that the music is great. I should have mentioned that. The music is fantastic in Tales of Arise. So that should be mentioned as well. But again, it's interesting. Number 7, very high in my list. I don't know that there's a ton to talk about. It's a Tales game with a new graphics engine, which is what I wanted. And so it delivered on that promise of everything that could be. So that's my number 7, which brings us back, I think, to your list, your number 7. I have to pull this thing back up here.
Well, it's cool. It does, because I'm going to talk first. I see the chat kind of talking about, he talked about it. Don said Intergrade was his like favorite RPG of the year. So just so you know how, at least Rick and I didn't agree on rules for how this would work.
I said it was your top 10 experiences.
I made my own rules, which were basically remasters and next-gen upgrades were only eligible for honorable mention. So any of the next-gen upgrades couldn't be in there. Intergrade, for instance, is a next-gen upgrade of Final Fantasy VII, which was, I think, Rick's number 2 or something last year.
It was 2.
I didn't get it on my list because I didn't get around to playing it. It's a great upgrade. It's a great game, but I don't consider it something that I could put on this list. Anything
Stay tuned.
Anything in early access was only eligible for honorable mention, but things that released from early access, like Griftlands, could be on the list. So that's just some of the things that I considered for what it's worth. So I guess that's just my caveat.
You don't have to defend yourself.
Maybe it should have come at the beginning. I don't know. Whatever.
I think it's great. What's your 7?
Loop Hero.
Hey, I'm glad I mentioned it in my won't appear list because I know you were trying to get me to play it. So,
Don's okay. Intergrade he's talking about the Yuffie stuff.
Well, Intermission. So Don, just be clear. Intergrade is the remaster. Intermission is the Yuffie stuff. So, we need you to be getting the Square Enix naming conventions correct.
Also, because Rick's going to put the Intermission stuff on his list.
Wait, are you suggesting that I know that the Yuffie DLC is called Intermission for some reason? I don't. Well, who are you? So Loop Hero. Well, first, let's hit Gecko Gamer again with another super chat. Thank you so much. Any ideas for a beginner JRPG for someone who only played Pokemon and constantly bounces off of Octopath Traveler? Well, I mean, Octopath would have been a good choice for beginner RPG, I think. Dragon Quest is really where I send people. My older daughter is playing Dragon Quest right now, loves them on the DS. They are very easily understood in terms of battle system, and that can be very important. They also have a very traditional fairy tale kind of approach to storytelling. So I definitely recommend Dragon Quest, probably over Final Fantasy if you're just trying to get somebody new into things. Outside of that, there's other kind of Pokemon analogs. Monster Hunter Stories has a kind of Pokemon approach to things, but it can be a little bit more difficult in my opinion. I think that's the kind of thing I would look at. Ni no Kuni is one that my daughters love. You're going to say Ni no Kuni? Okay.
Yeah. I thought those are pretty, those are on the easy side. They're on the cute side. I think they do a decent job of telling story. Obviously, Studio Ghibli creates like really pretty stuff.
Oh yeah.
And like I said, it's not too demanding like some RPGs really can be. That one.
Well, don't start with Shin Megami Tensei 5. I can promise you that. That game, it makes my mind melt. So it's don't start with those.
So yeah, I don't know. I'm not a big JRPG person, so I don't have a lot of nominations there, but definitely, yeah, Ni no Kuni, I think.
I am.
Yep. At some point, Rick and I split. We both were JRPG when JRPG was basically all you could play on like consoles as RPGs, and then now I've become more kind of a Western RPG person.
That's right. We lost Tom. It's okay. All right. So what do we got on this thing? I'm looking at pictures of mine.
So Loop Hero, it's another kind of roguelike. God, I don't even know how to define this exactly. It's like part puzzle, part deck building, part idle game.
Idle game? Okay.
Yeah. So like the way that the game works is you've got a little hero. So the narrative is like the world has been obliterated and you're trying to kind of rebuild it from memory. Okay. The hero wanders around the titular loop, which is what you're seeing a lot here. It starts as just a ring of road, and then you start putting things on it and around it for your hero to encounter. And the goal is to basically strengthen your hero so they're big enough to fight the boss at the end of whatever particular scenario you're in. So it's this, you're kind of like trying to push the hero as hard as you can to gain levels and equipment and things like that, and also not kill them. At the same time, outside of that, there's sort of a meta progression where you've got a little village that you're building up that gives you access to more classes and more starting stuff. Little things like that.
It's very brown.
Yeah, so there's that's the city, which acts like kind of a skill tree. So also as you're doing things, you're collecting resources from each of your runs, which you bring back here, and they give you kind of benefits that you can take from run to run.
Okay.
So I guess it's a roguelike. It's kind of a puzzle game. It's a little bit of resource management.
Your articulation of this thing is fascinating.
It's weird.
Okay. I think speaking of things that got added to consoles, I think this just got added to Switch recently.
The tower defense comparison from the chat is fair. Like, I think that's like you're setting things up and then you're just kind of watching them play out and then setting more things up. It's got an 8-bit style that I think is actually fun. It's got some weird synergies that you can find based on the class of character you're playing and the way you've built your deck.
Okay.
So
I know people really love this. Can you, separating from the game mechanic, can you articulate people have called this game addictive. People have said that they've really gotten into it. What's driving you to play this? Like, why does it work?
It's very flowy. What did you bring up that you said had
Civilization
really
is what I
think like
use.
Dungeon Encounters. I think you were talking about like had a really good flow where you just kind of get into it and you keep doing it. So this is like you have kind of a strategy. You're constantly getting dealt these cards that you're using to kind of build up the thing. I don't even know what you'll call it, world. And there's just a rhythm to it that feels really good. Also, at some point, you're gonna get to the point where you actually need like specific resources a lot. So you're looking for, all right, how do I create situations that are going to generate those resources in the world? So I need to spawn, certain enemies and kill them in certain ways and things like that. And so there's just a lot of interesting puzzle there. And I think just kind of watching the hero walk around and it's almost got a city builder feel to it where you're sort of watching it play out the machine that you've built.
Oh, that's nice.
But writ small, okay. Each run is less than an hour probably.
All right. Would you recommend it for somebody like me?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think Loop Hero is great. I think a lot of people could find something to enjoy in it. It is a roguelite. There's a lot of those. If that's not your cup of tea, this isn't going to change it.
Yes, we have a comment that says it's actually a roguelite. I've had this conversation with my brother. He doesn't really believe that pure roguelikes exist anymore, that they're so few and far between that there isn't some kind of meta progression, that the distinction is not worthwhile in making. I believe that's how you framed it to me before. So that's why he used roguelike right there, even though he was also describing meta progression at the same exact time.
Yes, I don't do those two. There might be a roguelike every once in a while. Pretty much everything that falls into that category is a roguelite. They have some sort of meta progression that you're dealing with because that's interesting. I think that's generally like how the genre has evolved.
I agree.
So it seems weird to have that distinction, but yes.
All right. Well, I haven't played this one. You've made me interested. I'm going to look to see what it costs on my Switch, I think, after we get done with this broadcast. Because one thing that didn't make my list, which I really enjoyed from the last week, is Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon, which is like a mix of a roguelite and a drop-down puzzle game, which is really, really interesting and fun. Highly recommend it, but I've played it for 2 hours. Can't make it on even an honorable mention list. So this kind of thing is exactly what I'm looking for from there. So I'll give it a shot. Who knows? You might not be wrong.
I think this is on the Switch now. I think it was coming to the Switch.
Yeah, I think it was.
It's a pretty good Switch game also. Something you can kind of do and not like 100% focus on.
All right. Well, I think that's a good number 7. So your list is weird, but it's coming together. So right now, since I'm not going to pull it up right now, but your Loop Hero, Griftlands, Far Cry 6, and Dungeon Encounters, it's like a bunch of oddball indies and then just Far Cry 6 sitting out there hanging out in the middle of that bottom half. So I love it. I think we're putting together some interesting stuff here, including my number 6, Forza Horizon 5. I don't know if you all are familiar with this kind of Forza series. You drive cars around, and those cars get you to places and win you more cars. And so that's proven to be a lot of fun. Interestingly enough, and I think Tom can vouch for me here, I've loved the Forza Horizon series basically since it started, at least since Forza Horizon 2. And one of the interesting things that's happened in the kind of conversation this year is this notion that Forza Horizon 5 is like deserving of best game of the year. It got these huge ratings. And I look at it and I say, yeah, Forza Horizon is always awesome. But I don't see it as that much better or different than Forza Horizon 4, which was in England and had the various seasons. Forza Horizon 5, being in Mexico, is kind of a great location for the series because it does have wild and varied biomes. You get to go through a bunch of these different places. I do think they have